Hello and welcome to today's analysis. Recently, we witnessed a very interesting global event, the Trump and Putin Alaska Summit. Many people were expecting something historic, a breakthrough in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But as the dust settled, the picture became clear. No agreement, no ceasefire, and yet, lots of indirect messaging to the world. In this video, we will break down what exactly happened at the summit, the implications for the Russia-Ukraine war, how the US tariffs are targeting India's oil trade, and most importantly, what this means for India's global positioning. So let's get started. Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin in Alaska, and although the two leaders described the talks as productive and constructive, the ground reality is very different. Putin openly said that Russia continues to make military progress in Ukraine, and he proposed a deal where some Ukrainian territory would be ceded to Moscow. But Trump could not accept this politically or diplomatically. And so, despite the smiling photos and press statements, there was no ceasefire, no written accord, and not even a proper concluding luncheon. In short, the summit turned into more of a diplomatic ritual than a problem-solving meeting. If we talk about the geopolitical context, Russia continues to make gradual advances in Ukraine. These may look small on the map, but each gain allows Moscow to sit at the negotiation table from a position of strength. On the other hand, Western nations cannot afford to make concessions, because accepting Russian territorial gains would set a very dangerous global precedent. But at the same time, supporting Ukraine is costly, both financially and politically, and this is creating fatigue in the West. The result? A prolonged deadlock. And because of this, global markets, whether energy or food, remain unstable. In short, the Russia-Ukraine conflict is not just about two countries, its ripple effect is keeping the entire world under an atmosphere of tension and uncertainty. Now if we look at Russia's global position, despite heavy Western sanctions and attempts to isolate Moscow, Russia has managed to avoid complete diplomatic isolation. Meetings like the Alaska Summit help Putin project that he is still an important global player. Economically, Russia has adapted by redirecting its oil and gas exports toward countries like India and China. This shift has allowed Moscow to cushion the blow of sanctions and secure vital revenues. And diplomatically, Russia shows resilience. It continues to find new partners and forums where it can bargain, challenge narratives, and keep its relevance alive. In short, instead of getting cornered, Russia has turned the crisis into an opportunity to rewire its global alignments. Let's now look at how the United States is pressuring India. Washington's strategy has been to impose heavy tariffs, recently as high as 50%, on Indian imports of Russian oil. The idea is simple. Make it financially difficult for India to keep buying cheap Russian crude. Along with tariffs comes political pressure. The US wants India to shift away from Moscow and align more closely with Western energy policies. At the same time, this strategy is also aimed at isolating Russia economically, cutting off its biggest buyers, so that the war in Ukraine becomes unsustainable. But the catch here is that India's energy security is non-negotiable. Delhi has made it clear. It will buy oil wherever it gets the best deal, even if that means facing tariffs and external pressure. Friends, when it comes to energy imports, India has always followed a path of strategic independence. Despite US pressure, New Delhi continues buying Russian oil at discounted rates. Because for us, energy security is directly linked to national security. At the same time, India is not putting all eggs in one basket. We are diversifying, importing from the Middle East, Africa, and even exploring long-term renewable and LNG options. This balance ensures that no single country can hold India's energy needs hostage. And most importantly, India's policy is rooted in strategic autonomy. We engage with all major powers, but the final decision is always guided by India's own interests, not external expectations. Now let's talk about the effectiveness of US tariff diplomacy. Washington expected that higher tariffs would force India to scale back Russian oil imports. But the reality turned out very different. India has not only maintained its imports, it has actually used the pressure as leverage to bargain for even better discounts from Moscow. This shows India's growing bargaining power in global energy markets. With such massive demand, India knows that suppliers, whether Russia or anyone else, cannot afford to ignore us. And above all, this is a clear example of strategic autonomy in action. India listens to every side, but ultimately, our policies follow only one compass: India's national interest. Finally, if we look at India's overall response, it has been a masterclass in balanced diplomacy. On one hand, India engages with the US, Europe, and other Western partners. On the other hand, it hasn't hesitated to buy discounted Russian oil, ensuring huge economic gains and energy security for our population. This pragmatic approach shows that India is not choosing sides. It is choosing its own interests. Even in the face of sanctions, tariffs, and global pressure, New Delhi has shown resilience by sticking to a policy of strategic autonomy. Now, if we analyze this whole episode through the lens of international relations theory, what do we see? It's pure power politics in action. Every major player, Russia, the US, and India, is driven first and foremost by national interests, not lofty ideals of cooperation. Great power relations are always filled with challenges. The US cannot force Russia to compromise, Russia will not back down unless it gains strategically, and summits often end as symbolic shows rather than real agreements. In the middle of all this, India stands out with its strategic autonomy. By balancing multiple partnerships, refusing to bend under pressure, and keeping national interest at the center, India shows that in today's world, pragmatic independence is the real strength of diplomacy. The big analytical insights we can draw from this entire episode. First, the India-Russia energy partnership has emerged as a very important pillar in global geopolitics. At a time when Western sanctions tried to choke the Russian economy, India stepped in as a major buyer of Russian oil. This not only benefited India with cheaper energy, but also gave Russia a crucial economic lifeline. So, in a way, India has shown that global energy flows cannot simply be dictated by the West. Second, the US tariff strategy deserves some serious criticism. Washington tried to use financial pressure by slapping 50% import tariffs on Russian oil entering India. But this approach reveals a very rigid mindset that other countries should automatically align with American expectations. The reality is quite different. India is not an extension of the US foreign policy establishment, it is an independent power. By assuming that economic sticks and penalties would force New Delhi to back down, the US showed an outdated Cold War mindset, where smaller countries were expected to simply follow orders. But today, India has flipped the script. Instead of reducing imports, India used the very same pressure to negotiate even deeper discounts from Russia. In simple terms, the US attempted to punish India, but India converted that move into an economic advantage. This shows just how ineffective tariff diplomacy can be when applied to a rising power that values its autonomy. Third, summits like the Alaska meeting between Trump and Putin are also important to understand. These gatherings look glamorous, but they are mainly photo opportunities unless both sides are ready to compromise. In this case, Russia wanted the West to concede Ukrainian territory, while the US couldn't allow it. The result? Deadlock. This again exposes the limits of Western diplomacy. Lots of statements, lots of pressure, but no real solutions on the ground. And finally, the bigger diplomatic reality is this. The US continues to believe it can pressure every country into aligning with its policies. But the world has changed. India is no longer willing to sacrifice its national interest just to please Washington or Brussels. Instead, New Delhi has shown resilience against sanctions, an ability to secure economic gains from discounted Russian oil, and above all, a commitment to strategic autonomy. The US mindset reflects overconfidence and a failure to accept the rise of other powers. India's approach, on the other hand, is pragmatic, independent, and clearly focused on results. That is why, while the US struggles to impose its will, India emerges from this entire episode stronger, both economically and diplomatically. If you found this breakdown insightful, do support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and sharing it with your friends. This really motivates us to bring more such in-depth analysis for you. And now, I leave you with a question. Do you think the US strategy of using sanctions and tariffs will backfire in the long run, pushing more countries, like India, to pursue greater independence from American influence?